It's 9 p.m. and you're watching the news. Namaskar, I'm Bhawna Nayar. Over the next half hour, we'll bring you the top news of the day from the national and international arena. We'll give you all the updates on the Prime Minister Modi's visit to Europe, talks between the Prime Minister and German Chancellor, and much more. There'll also be stories that matters to you, stories that you can connect with, and news that you ought to know. Let's start with the top headlines this Monday evening. Delegation-level talks between Prime Minister Modi and German Chancellor in Berlin, green and sustainable energy partnership signed between both countries. Supreme Court says centre current vaccination policy not arbitrary, but asserts that no one can be forced for vaccination. Russia redeploys forces from Mariupol to East Ukraine. Evacuations begin in the city. President Zelensky hails Nancy Pelosi's visit to Kiev. Harshada Sharad Garud becomes first Indian weightlifter to win gold in Junior World Championships, opens India's medal account on the very first day of the competition. Eid celebrated in many countries of the world, including Gulf Festival, to be celebrated across India on Tuesday. And let's quickly look at some more important news now. CBI files fresh case against fugitive Mehul Choksi, Gitanjali Gems, SLC and others. Recent spike in COVID-19 cases can't be described as the fourth wave, says ICMR. Heat wave intensifies in 8 districts of Rajasthan. Bikaner hits highest at 47.1 degrees Celsius. In bureaucratic reshuffle, Uttar Pradesh government transfers 16 senior IAS officers. J&K Administrative Council approves 50% waiver of passenger tax. Key suspect in Patiala clash, Barjinder Singh Parwana arrested by police in Mohali. Investors expecting rate hike by US Fed rate this week. BSE Sensex down 600 points in opening trade. Uttarakhand considering making scriptures such as Gita and Ramayana as part of school syllabus, says its State Education Minister. Delhi High Court allows Nizamuddin Markaz to stay open till October 14. 8 people, including 6 children, killed in fire that burned scores of homes near capital city Manila. And now news in detail. Prime Minister Narendra Modi met German Chancellor Olaf Scholz on Monday. Both leaders reviewed bilateral relations, including accelerating trade, cultural contacts. Prime Minister Modi and Scholz also signed green and sustainable energy partnership in Berlin. This is the first meeting the Prime Minister had with Scholz after he became Chancellor.
भारत और जर्मनी दोनों ही देश इस महत्वपूर्ण पार्टनरशिप को कितनी प्राथमिकता दे रहे हैं। लोकतांत्रिक देशों के तौर पर भारत और जर्मनी कई कॉमन मूल्यों को साझा करते हैं। इन साझा मूल्यों और साझा हितों के आधार पर पिछले कुछ वर्षों में हमारे द्विपक्षीय संबंधों में उल्लेखनीय प्रगति हुई है।
Another success of our bilateral exchanges today is the agreement on a migration and mobility partnership, which allows us to benefit from the enormous potential of migration and skilled labour to both our countries' interest and benefit. This goes to show that our relationship is not only broad and intensive, but it is also based on a deep sense of trust.
Earlier, Prime Minister Modi arrived in Berlin to a warm welcome on the first leg of his 3-nation tour to Europe. Before his departure, Prime Minister Modi said his Berlin visit will provide an opportunity for talks with Chancellor Scholz, whom he met at the G20 last year, when he was Vice Chancellor and Finance Minister. He also said in year 2021, India and Germany celebrated 70 years of diplomatic relations, and the countries have been strategic partners since 2000. Both leaders on Monday addressed a high-level meeting and interacted with the top CEOs of companies of both the countries. On his arrival in Berlin, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was warmly received by the Indian community. After Berlin, the Prime Minister will visit Denmark on Tuesday to hold bilateral talks with his counterpart, Mette Frederiksen. On the last leg of his visit, the Prime Minister will meet French President Emmanuel Macron in France. Moving on, GST collections reached an all-time high of Rs 1.68 lakh crore in April 2022. Revenues rose by 20% in the month as compared to April 2021. GST collections in April 2021 were Rs 1.4 lakh crore. Gross GST collections touched a record of Rs 1.68 lakh crore in April. This is an increase of about Rs 25,000 crore from the previous high of Rs 1.42 lakh crore in March 2022. And now, Chief of Army Staff General Manoj Pandey met Defence Minister Rajnath Singh in Delhi on Monday. This was his first meeting with Rajnath Singh after taking over the new Army Chief. General Manoj Pandey said his priority will be to ensure high-level military preparedness to meet the challenges of the present and future on all fronts of the conflict.
Any hybrid threat that is posed on us from the other side, be it in terms of infiltration, terrorist attacks, or radicalization through social media, a number of other means. We are resolute on our effort to counter this, and I'm sure we'll succeed in this.
And heat wave conditions are abating in most parts of the country. The Weather Office predicted light rain in Delhi over the next 3 days amid the hottest pre-summer months in decades. Here is a report.
The Indian Meteorological Department on Monday issued a yellow alert for northwest India. It said that the heat wave is ending over Delhi, Punjab, Haryana and Uttar Pradesh. There are chances of hot weather in West Rajasthan and Vidarbha. It also said that western disturbance is very active and the wind pattern can be seen in Delhi, Lucknow and Jaipur. For the next 6 to 7 days, east winds will also be very strong and the temperature will not rise. In Andaman, low pressure will intensify after 6th May. The National Weather Forecasting Agency predicted that isolated parts of Himachal Pradesh, Punjab, Haryana, Chandigarh, Delhi, South Uttar Pradesh, Kutch and East Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Telangana and West Rajasthan will experience heat wave conditions for 24 hours till Tuesday. It also predicted thunderstorm activity over northwest and east India till Wednesday and over northeast India till Tuesday. Northwest and central India recorded average maximum temperatures of 35.9 and 37.78 Celsius respectively in April. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
Moving on to our next story, the Supreme Court has stated that the centre's current vaccination policy is not arbitrary, but at the same time, it also ruled that no individual can be forced to get vaccinated. Disposing of a petition seeking to stay on vaccine mandates issued by authorities in various parts of the country, the Apex Court said it is satisfied that the current vaccination policy of the Union of India is informed of the relevant considerations and cannot be said to be unreasonable or manifestly arbitrary. Upholding an individual's right to bodily integrity and to refuse to get medically treated, the court said no individual can be forced to be vaccinated. But it also asserted that in the interest of the protection of the community health, the government is entitled to regulate issues of public health concern by imposing certain limitations. And now let's talk about our festival Eid-ul-Fitr. Eid-ul-Fitr will be celebrated on Tuesday across India. Special prayers will be offered at Eidgahs on the occasion. Many Gulf countries celebrated Eid on Monday. There was tremendous enthusiasm among people to celebrate the festival all over the world, including Indonesia. Due to restrictions and travel restrictions imposed to deal with the coronavirus, people had to be content with subdued celebrations of the festival for the last 2 years. Eid-ul-Fitr is celebrated after 1 month of Ramadan. It's time to take a short break here. On the other side, Russia-Ukraine conflict brings rising prices for Ugandan people. More news coming on the other side. You stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching the news. Now let's take a look at all the latest developments from the war front in Ukraine. Russian and Ukrainian officials confirmed that civilians were evacuated from houses close to Azovstal steel works in Mariupol. The Mariupol mayor said that the buses carrying civilians left the city on Sunday. Hundreds of people still remain trapped in the Soviet-era facility that is last stronghold of resistance to Moscow's siege in the city. It was not immediately clear how many people had been evacuated on the buses, but those on board were not from the Azovstal steel works. Poland has asked the European Union to impose a clear cut-off date at which member states will have to stop importing Russian oil. Warsaw has repeatedly advocated tough measures against Russia, but the EU is split on how sanctions should be enforced. Many European nations are still heavily reliant on Moscow for their energy needs. Russia halted gas supplies to Bulgaria and Poland last week after they refused to pay it in rubles. Moscow's offensive is expected to result in a massive decline in the number of Russian tourists visiting Turkey this year. The projected downturn is a major cause of concern for the country that is battling economic crisis. Ukrainian President Zelensky has accused Turkey of double standards by welcoming Russian tourists. Ukrainian forces say that several Russian battalions have been redeployed from Mariupol to Popasna. Popasna is one of the epicenters of fighting in the east as Russian military has sought to break through the Ukrainian defenses as part of its offensive in Donbass. Meanwhile, Israel has denounced Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov for suggesting Nazi leader Adolf Hitler had Jewish roots. It had demanded an apology from Moscow. Israel's foreign ministry said it summoned the Russian ambassador for a tough talk over Lavrov's comment made on Sunday in an interview with Italian television. A Ukrainian drone destroyed two Russian Raptor-class patrol ships in the Black Sea on Monday, Ukraine's army said. There was no immediate reaction from Moscow to the claim. Russia, on the other hand, claimed that its armed forces shot at a Ukrainian MiG-29 fighter jet in eastern Ukraine. According to the UN Refugee Agency, more than 5.5 million people have now fled Ukraine since Russia launched its invasion. The majority have left for neighboring Poland that has welcomed over 3 million people trying to escape Russia's offensive. New Zealand has added 170 Russian politicians and 6 defense companies to its sanction list. It announced that the sanctions will prohibit them from carrying out activity in New Zealand and prevent New Zealand from becoming a financial haven for those involved with Russia's illegal activities in Ukraine. And now news from the other parts of the world. Across the world, on 1st of May, workers, labor unions and leftist demonstrators marched through major cities of the recognition of International Workers' Day, commonly known as May Day. The events ranged from celebrations of the working class to politically charged calls for action. In France, police fired tear gas on black-clad anarchists protesting against the policies of the newly re-elected president Emmanuel Macron. Thousands of people joined May Day marches across France, calling for salary increases and for Macron to drop his plan to raise retirement age from 62 to 65. About 250 rallies were organized in Paris and other cities. Most demonstrations were peaceful, but violence broke out in Paris, where police arrested 45 people. In Brazil, crowds gathered to hear union leaders as well as the former president and likely presidential candidate Lula da Silva. Activists waved flags and held banners celebrating unions and socialist parties and applauding leftist leaders criticizing conservative President Jair Bolsonaro. In Rio de Janeiro, pro-Bolsonaro supporters denounced the left as a danger to the country. Moving on, in Haiti, hundreds of workers took to streets with handwritten banners to bring attention to the low wages. Haiti is among the poorest countries with unemployment of around 14.6% in 2022. Industry workers carried signs demanding a minimum wage of $21 a day. Average wage is currently $7 a day for 9 hours of work. In Colombia now, union groups and local marched through the streets of the capital. Many banners call for Russia to leave Ukraine. In Athens, Greece, metro trains came to a halt and ships were docked in ports as thousands of workers joined May Day rallies to protest against soaring energy and food costs. Gas and power bills have surged. Sanctions against Russia following the Ukraine conflict have taken inflation in Greece to the multi-year highs. And now a good story. New Zealand is welcoming tourists from the United States, Canada, Britain, Japan and 50 other countries for the first time in more than 2 years of the pandemic restrictions. The country is renowned for its breathtaking scenery and adventure activities like bungee jumping and skiing. Have a look.
Before the COVID pandemic hit till March 2020, New Zealand was the destination for over 3 million tourists each year. It contributed 20% in foreign income and 5% to New Zealand's overall economy. All of that ended once New Zealand imposed some of the world's toughest border restrictions. New Zealand reopened to tourists from Australia 3 weeks ago and on Monday to about 60 visa waiver countries including much of Europe. Most tourists from India, China and other non-waiver countries are still not allowed to enter. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern told reporters in Wellington that the new arrivals will further boost New Zealand's economy. Tourists will need to be vaccinated and to test themselves for the virus after arriving. At Auckland Airport, flights bringing in tourists began landing from early in the morning, coming in direct from places including Los Angeles, San Francisco, Kuala Lumpur and Singapore. The border reopening will help boost tourism ahead of the New Zealand's upcoming ski season. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
Prices for basic commodities have been soaring in Uganda for several weeks. The government is blamed for the prolonged coronavirus pandemic and the war in Ukraine. But economic experts feel that the situation calls for a change of approach to cushion the blow.
With every increasing prices for basic commodities, the once busy streets of Kampala's markets are getting emptier each day. In recent weeks, many filling stations have run dry as Ugandans saw fuel prices shooting up. The government told the Ugandan parliament last month that the economy's current problems stems from a disruption of oil and food supply due to Ukraine conflict. Supply of cereals such as wheat, corn, sunflower oil as well as essential metals like aluminium and nickel have been impacted. The war in Ukraine, which supplies nearly half of the world's sunflower oil, on top of the 25% from Russia, has interrupted shipments and sent cooking oil prices spiraling. For Ugandans, many of whom already live in poverty, it means a bigger struggle to make ends meet. Business analysts believe the government needs to change its approach to help cushion Ugandans who are still recovering from the COVID-19 disruption. They say the free market model adopted by Uganda is disastrous in situations like this where business owners dictate prices. The government has promised to put in measures to ensure Ugandans are protected from individuals who are trying to take advantage of the population. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
And now news from the other parts of the world. Amid raging protests against the economic crisis in the country, Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa on Monday appealed to all the political parties to put aside differences and work in the public interest. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa refused to resign, saying he enjoys a majority in parliament. However, the president has personally appealed to him to resign. The Prime Minister told the President that he would not step down at a time when he was trying to resolve the economic crisis. The US Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and a delegation of the half-dozen US representatives met Polish President Andrzej Duda in Poland. The visit came 2 days after Pelosi and her delegation met in Kiev with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Pelosi is the most senior American lawmaker to visit Ukraine since Russia's war began more than 2 months ago. 2 people were rescued on Sunday from the rubble of a building in central China. More than 50 hours it was collapsed, leaving dozens trapped or missing. Police arrested 9 people, including the building owner, on suspicion of causing a major accident. 7 people were rescued from the building, which collapsed Friday afternoon in the inland city of Changsha, the capital of Hunan province. About 20 others remained trapped and 39 had not been accounted for. Calmer weather conditions in the northern New Mexico have helped more than 1,000 firefighters battling for nation's largest active wildfire on Sunday. Strong winds had pushed it toward the small city of Las Vegas, New Mexico. Fire managers warn of windy conditions in the coming days, and their officers urged residents to remain vigilant for further possible evacuation orders. Some local residents say they are not going anywhere. A tornado that damaged more than 1,000 buildings in Kansas generated winds up to 165 miles per hour and carved a path of destruction nearly 13 miles long. The National Weather Service said that the tornado that caused extensive damage, mostly in the Wichita suburb of Andover, and injured several people, rated an EF3 on the enhanced Fujita scale it uses to assess tornadoes. 4 people, including 2 firefighters who were responding to a call in Andover, were injured during the storm, but their injuries were minor. Millions of Australian grapes are being left to rot on the ground as a Chinese boycott of Australian wine causes demand to dry up. The trade dispute has seen wine exports drop by 30%, leaving some of the growers with no choice but to dump their harvest. Have a look at this report.
It's harvest time, but not all grapes in this vineyard are going to make it into a bottle this season. 2 years ago, the crop fetched $700 Australian a ton. Last year, it was $400, and this year, the entire crop is worth nothing. The problem lies in China's continuing boycott of Australian red wine. Due to the trade dispute and the imposition of the punitive tariffs on Australian wine, a $1.2 billion Australian market is closed. The trade dispute stems from Australia's support for a probe into the coronavirus. Relations plunged to a multi-decade low after Beijing blocked imports of various Australian goods. It also means winemakers are making less red wine. Adding to the export woes, shipping to international markets has been disrupted during the pandemic. Luckily for some farmer, the world still loves Australian Chardonnay that has had bumper crops this year. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
And now all the action from the sporting world. Starting today with weightlifting, weightlifter Harshada Sharad Garud created history today by becoming the first ever Indian to win a gold medal in the Junior World Weightlifting Championship in Heraklion, Greece. Competing in the women's 45 kilogram category, the 16-year-old lifted a total of 153 kilogram. She lifted 83 kg in the clean and jerk and 70 kg in the snatch to win the title in the field of 8 competitors on the opening day of the competition. And on to the cricket now. In the 46th match of the IPL played at the Pune last evening, defending champions Chennai Super Kings defeated Sunrisers Hyderabad by 13 runs. In an exciting encounter, CSK scored 202 for 2 with openers Rituraj Gaikwad and Devon Conway adding a CSK record of 189 runs for the first wicket. Gaikwad was unlucky to miss a century, getting out of 99. Conway remained not out on 85. Chasing a target of 203, Sunrisers Hyderabad could reach 189 for 6. Left-arm pacer Mukesh Chaudhary took 4 wickets for Chennai. And before we wrap up, let's take a look at the headlines once again. Delegation-level talks between Prime Minister Modi and German Chancellor in Berlin. Green and sustainable energy partnership signed between both countries. Supreme Court says centre's current vaccination policy not arbitrary, but asserts that no one can be forced for vaccination. Russia redeploys forces from Mariupol to East Ukraine. Evacuations begin in the city. President Zelensky hails Nancy Pelosi's visit to Kiev. Harshada Sharad Garud becomes the first Indian weightlifter to win gold in Junior World Championships. Opens India's medal account on the very first day of the competition. Eid celebrated in many countries of the world, including Gulf Festival, to be celebrated across India on Tuesday. That's all we have for this in this bulletin. Keep watching Sansad TV for more updates. Good night. Namaskar.